Listen, I have been studying at the Galactic Military Academy for 3 rotations now, and I thought I had seen everything. Trust me when I say that assumption was about as accurate as a drunk vegan's aim at a precision target. My name is Corex, by the way, and I am what you would call a typical Zenthari. Blue skin, 4 arms, and an unfortunate tendency to assume I know better than everyone else. Spoiler alert, I do not. The day everything changed started like any other boring lecture cycle. Professor Valax was droning on about interspecies combat psychology, his mandibles clicking in that annoying rhythm that made half the class want to commit academic suicide. The amphitheater was packed with the usual suspects, Krillian, honor students, with their ridiculously shiny carapaces, Morgothian brutes, who probably ate smaller species for breakfast, and a handful of other supposedly advanced civilizations. Then there was her. The human sat in the back corner, as usual. Maya Torres, Chelanaya, though most of us just called her the strange one behind her back. Not very creative, I know, but creativity was never our species' strong point. What can I say? We are better at math than imagination. Now, humans had only been accepted into the Academy 5 cycles ago, after their species somehow managed to impress the Council with their tactical innovation during the Keth Wars. Most of us figured it was a fluke. I mean, come on. They are small, fragile, have only 2 arms like some kind of evolutionary mistake, and their homeworld is not even a Class 7 military power. The fact that they managed to survive contact with galactic civilization was already surprising enough. Maya Torres looked even more unremarkable than the rest of her species. Average height for a human, which meant she barely reached my shoulder. Brown hair that seemed to change color depending on the light. Honestly, how impractical is that for camouflage? Her skin was this weird peachy tan color that reminded me of overripe Vorthan fruit. Not exactly what you would call intimidating, but here is where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying in hindsight. She always wore these high-necked uniforms. While the rest of us were comfortable showing our natural markings, scars, or species identifiers, Maya Torres kept everything covered up to her chin. Some of the Krillians whispered that humans were ashamed of their soft skin. The Morgothians figured she was hiding some kind of deformity. Me? I just thought she was cold all the time. Their homeworld is ridiculously temperate compared to civilized planets. The mocking started during combat theory class, about halfway through the cycle. Lieutenant Commander Draxus was explaining the psychological impact of intimidation displays across different species. He gestured to a few students as examples. The Morgothian war cry, for instance, Draxus rumbled, his own throat sacs inflating impressively. Or the Krillian threat posture. He nodded to Zek 9, who immediately reared up on his hind legs. Mandibles spread wide in a display that made several smaller species students instinctively step back. Now, can anyone tell me what intimidation displays humans are known for? Draxus asked, his 6 eyes scanning the room with what I can only describe as academic cruelty. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Chix 17, one of the more obnoxious Krillian students, raised his primary appendage. Professor, I do not believe humans have any intimidation displays. They are too soft. A ripple of laughter spread through the class. Even I had to admit, it seemed accurate. Humans were notorious for their complete lack of natural weapons, armor, or threatening physical features. They were basically walking prey animals that had somehow stumbled into space travel. Maya Torres did not react. She just sat there, taking notes like nothing had happened, which, honestly, made it worse. It was like she agreed with us. Draxus nodded thoughtfully. Interesting observation, Cadet Chix 17. Miss Torres, would you care to respond? All eyes turned to the human. She looked up from her notes, those strange brown eyes scanning the room with an expression I could not quite read. No, sir, she said quietly. I would not. More laughter. This time, It was not just the Krillians. Even some of the normally respectful Altarians were chuckling behind their breathing apparatus. That was when Vex 12 decided to push his luck. Vex was what we Zenthari call a glory hound, always trying to make himself look better by tearing others down. Perhaps humans just run away when threatened? He suggested, his voice carrying that particular tone of false innocence that immediately made everyone lean forward in anticipation of drama. The laughter got louder. I found myself smiling too, which I am not proud of now, but at the time it seemed harmless enough, just typical Academy ribbing. Maya Torres still did not react. She just went back to her notes. This went on for weeks. It became a running joke throughout our class. Whenever intimidation or combat psychology came up, someone would make a crack about humans and their complete lack of threatening displays. Maya Torres endured it all with the same quiet dignity, never rising to the bait, never defending herself or her species. Looking back, that should have been our first warning. In my experience, prey animals either fight back or run away when cornered. They do not just sit there, taking notes, like they are studying us instead of the other way around. The situation escalated during our mid-rotation evaluations. The Academy has this charming tradition where students demonstrate their species' natural advantages in combat scenarios. It is supposed to build mutual respect and understanding. In reality, it usually just reinforces everyone's existing prejudices. The Morgothians went first, naturally. Grak 7 stepped into the demonstration ring and proceeded to bench press what looked like a small spacecraft engine, while roaring loud enough to rattle the windows. Impressive, sure, but also completely predictable. Next came the Krillians, with their lightning-fast reflexes and those razor-sharp mandibles that could apparently slice through hull plating. Tech 9 performed a series of combat forms that looked like a deadly dance, each movement precise enough to be beautiful and lethal enough to make me grateful we were separated by an energy barrier. Even the Vorthans managed to look threatening, despite being essentially sentient mushrooms. When Spikes 4 demonstrated how quickly they could secrete paralytic toxins, half the class instinctively took a step back. Then, it was Maya Torres's turn. She walked into the demonstration ring with that same quiet composure she always showed. No dramatic posturing, no threatening displays, no apparent weapons or natural advantages. She just stood there, looking remarkably ordinary. "Well?" Professor Draxus prompted. "What natural advantages does your species bring to combat situations?" Maya Torres was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft we all had to strain to hear her. "Permission to demonstrate non-verbal intimidation, Professor?" Draxus looked puzzled, but nodded. "Granted." What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about humans, about predators, about the nature of fear itself. Maya Torres reached up and slowly unzipped the high collar of her uniform. "Now, I know what you are thinking. Big deal, right? So she shows a little skin." We had all seen human anatomy in xenobiology class. Nothing particularly shocking about their physiology, except what Maya Torres revealed was not just skin. Wrapped around her throat, in intricate black ink that seemed to move and writhe in the amphitheater lighting, was a tattoo. But not just any tattoo. This was a detailed, anatomically perfect representation of a human skull, its empty eye sockets seeming to stare directly at whoever was looking at it. The skull was surrounded by what looked like twisted thorns, and below it, in sharp, angular script that somehow managed to look threatening in any language, were the words, "Death before dishonor." The room went completely silent, but Maya Torres was not done. As we all stared in fascination and growing unease, she reached into her pocket and withdrew what looked like a small, innocuous piece of metal. With practiced ease, she attached it to her lower lip, a piercing, I later learned, though at the time it looked like some kind of primitive weapons modification. Then she smiled. Now, I had seen humans smile before. It was usually this weak, submissive expression that made them look even more harmless than usual. But this was something else entirely. Maya Torres's smile showed her teeth, those small, mostly flat human teeth that we had all dismissed as completely non-threatening. Except when she smiled like that, with that skull tattoo wrapped around her throat and that metal glinting in her lip, those teeth suddenly looked very much like the teeth of something that hunted other things for sport. The effect was immediate and visceral. I felt my skin prickle with instinctive alarm. My secondary hearts began beating faster, and every survival instinct my species had developed over millions of years of evolution started screaming warnings that I was in the presence of an apex predator. But the truly terrifying part was not the tattoo, or the piercing, or even that predatory smile. It was her eyes. Maya Torres's eyes had not changed at all. They were still the same calm, intelligent brown eyes she had always had. But now, with the context provided by her throat display, I could see what I had been missing all along. Those were not the eyes of prey. Those were the eyes of something that studied its environment, calculated risks and opportunities, and made decisions based on cold, rational assessment of tactical advantages. Those were the eyes of a creature that had spent generations learning to hide among more obviously dangerous predators until the moment came to strike. Maya Torres stood there in that demonstration ring, letting us all get a good long look at what she really was, and then she spoke again. Her voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was something underneath it now, something that made my translation implant struggle to find adequate words in Zenthari. My species' primary intimidation display, she said conversationally, is allowing potential threats to see exactly what we are willing to do to protect what matters to us. The tattoo indicates that I would rather die than compromise my honor. The piercing indicates that I am comfortable with pain. The smile. She paused, and that terrible smile got just a little wider. The smile indicates that I am comfortable with violence. Dead silence in the amphitheater. 200 cadets from dozens of different species, all of us frozen in place like small animals that had suddenly realized they were being hunted. Maya Torres let the silence stretch for exactly the right amount of time, long enough to make her point, not so long as to seem theatrical. Then she zipped her collar back up, tucked the piercing away, and returned to her perfectly ordinary, unremarkable human appearance. "Will that be sufficient for the demonstration, Professor?" she asked politely. Professor Draxus, whose own species was known for their tactical brilliance and psychological warfare expertise, took a long moment to respond. When he finally did, his voice carried a note of what I can only describe as professional respect. "More than sufficient, Cadet Torres. Most illuminating." Maya Torres nodded crisply and returned to her seat. As she walked past the front rows, I noticed something interesting. None of the students who had been mocking her for weeks could quite meet her eyes anymore. The rest of the class proceeded in subdued tones. A few more species demonstrated their natural advantages, but somehow none of them seemed quite as impressive as they had before. It was hard to get excited about razor-sharp claws or acidic spit when you had just been reminded that the most dangerous predator in any room was often the one that did not look dangerous at all. After class, I found myself walking behind Maya Torres as we headed back to the dormitory levels. She moved with that same quiet, unremarkable gait she always had. But somehow I could not shake the feeling that she was aware of exactly where every other person in the corridor was positioned, how quickly they could move, what potential weapons they might be carrying. It occurred to me that she had probably always been aware of these things. We had just been too arrogant to notice. As we reached the transport hub, Maya Torres stopped and turned around. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought she was going to say something to me, maybe call me out for laughing along with the others, or challenge me to some kind of confrontation. Instead, she just looked at me with those calm, intelligent eyes and nodded slightly. A acknowledgement, perhaps, or maybe a warning. Then she stepped onto the transport and was gone. leaving me standing there with the growing realization that everything I thought I knew about humans, about predators, about the nature of strength itself, had just been turned upside down. That night, I did some research on human military history. What I found kept me awake for the next 3 sleep cycles, and convinced me that the Galactic Council had not made a mistake letting humans into the Academy. They had made a mistake taking so long to invite them. 3 sleep cycles later, I was still processing what I had learned about human warfare. Let me tell you, their historical records read like horror fiction written by a species with severe psychological disorders. Wars that lasted for years, sometimes decades. Conflicts where they would rather destroy entire cities than surrender them. Tactical doctrines based on the assumption that acceptable casualties could reach 30% or higher. But the truly disturbing part, they called this conventional warfare. I was reviewing a particularly nightmarish account of something called the Battle of Stalingrad, when my roommate, Thek 5, burst into our shared quarters. His usually pristine Altarian breathing apparatus steamed up with excitement. "Corex, you need to hear this," he wheezed through his translator. "There was an incident in advanced combat scenarios today." I looked up from my study tablet, grateful for the distraction. Reading about human military history was starting to give me what their own species would probably call trust issues. What kind of incident? Thek settled onto his rest platform, adjusting his atmospheric regulators with obvious agitation. Maya Torres was assigned to Blue Team for the orbital assault simulation. Guess who was on Red Team as the defending commander? I felt a chill run through my secondary nervous system. Please tell me it was not Vex 12. Oh, it was definitely Vex 12. Thek's voice carried that particular tone of horrified fascination that meant someone was about to tell me something I really did not want to hear, but absolutely had to know. Along with Chick 17 and 3 other cadets who had been making jokes about humans. Perfect. Just perfect. Because if there was one thing my research had taught me about humans, it was that they had absolutely no sense of proportion when it came to settling scores. Their concept of getting even typically involved escalation factors that would make a Morgothian berserker pause for reflection. "Tell me Vex did not do anything stupid," I said, though we both knew that was like asking the local star not to emit radiation. Thek's breathing apparatus wheezed what I had learned to recognize as nervous laughter. "Well, that depends on how you define stupid. Tactically speaking, his plan was actually quite sound. Red Team had superior defensive positions, better equipment allocation, and numerical advantage in the scenario parameters. But he spent the first 15 minutes of the exercise broadcasting taunts over the communication channels about how Blue Team's human was probably looking for a place to hide. I buried my face in my hands. Well, technically, I buried my face in 2 of my hands while the other 2 continued taking notes, but the sentiment was the same. "How badly did she humiliate them?" "Corex," Thek said quietly. "It was not humiliation. It was art." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Literally crawl. Zenthari epidermis has this unfortunate tendency to shift colors when we experience extreme anxiety, and I could feel myself cycling through several unflattering shades of nervous purple. "Define art," I said carefully. Thek activated his personal display unit and pulled up what looked like tactical analysis footage. The scenario was a standard orbital platform assault. Blue Team had to infiltrate and capture 3 strategic points within a 40-minute time limit. Red Team had to prevent this using all available defensive resources. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of the simulation environment, a typical military space station with multiple levels, narrow corridors, and strategic choke points. Standard Academy training scenario, designed to test small unit tactics and coordination under pressure. Maya Torres requested to be assigned as Blue Team's reconnaissance specialist, Thek continued. Which seemed reasonable enough. Humans are supposed to be decent at stealth operations, according to their species profile. I was beginning to see where this was going, and I did not like it one bit. Let me guess. She did not use stealth. Oh no, she used stealth, just not the way anyone expected. Thek highlighted several sections of the station map. See, while the rest of Blue Team was conducting their initial approach, friender, very by the book, very predictable, Maya Torres disappeared. Disappeared how? No one knows. She was there for the mission briefing, acknowledged her assigned objectives, and then vanished from all sensors. Her teammates assumed she was conducting standard reconnaissance. Red Team assumed she was hiding somewhere, waiting for the main assault to begin. The display shifted to show recorded footage from the simulation. I watched Blue Team's remaining 4 members advance through the station's lower levels, moving with textbook precision toward their first objective. Meanwhile, Red Team had positioned themselves in strong defensive formations around all 3 strategic points, exactly as their training had taught them. It looked like a standard military exercise, right up until the moment everything went completely insane. 14 minutes into the scenario, Thek said, his voice dropping to an almost reverent whisper, Red Team's communications started going down. The tactical display showed it happening in real time. One by one, the red dots, representing Red Team members, began losing contact with their command structure. Not dying, according to the simulation parameters, just cut off. Maya Torres had bypassed all 3 strategic objectives, Thek explained, and gone directly for Red Team's command and control infrastructure. She was not trying to capture territory. She was eliminating their ability to coordinate a defense. I stared at the display in growing horror. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and completely contrary to everything we had been taught about small unit tactics. The standard doctrine was to secure objectives through direct assault or infiltration. What Maya Torres was doing looked more like, well, like terrorism. But that is not even the impressive part, Thek continued. Watch what happens next. The display showed Blue Team beginning their assault on the first strategic point, expecting to face organized resistance. Instead, they found Red Team members who were confused, isolated, and completely unable to coordinate their response. What should have been a brutal firefight turned into a series of one-sided engagements. Meanwhile, Maya Torres had somehow infiltrated Red Team's command center, 19-1, the most heavily defended position on the entire station, and was systematically destroying their tactical coordination systems from the inside. How? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. She used the maintenance shafts, Thek said simply. Turns out, humans are small enough and flexible enough to access areas that the station's designers never considered tactical vulnerabilities. She spent the first 10 minutes of the scenario mapping the station's internal infrastructure, then used it to bypass every single defensive position Red Team had established. The tactical implications were staggering. Every military facility in the galaxy was designed with defensive parameters based on the physical limitations of known spacefaring species. If humans could routinely access areas that were considered inaccessible, it gets worse, Thek said, apparently reading my expression. Once she had control of the command center, Maya Torres started feeding false information to the remaining Red Team members. She convinced half of them that Blue Team was attacking from the opposite direction. The other half received orders to abandon their positions and reinforce areas that were not actually under attack. I watched the display in fascination and mounting dread as Red Team's defensive formation completely collapsed. Not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through simple, methodical psychological manipulation. Maya Torres had turned Red Team's own command structure into a weapon against them. The scenario ended after 28 minutes, Thek concluded. Blue Team captured all 3 objectives with minimal casualties. Red Team never even managed to mount an effective resistance. What did the instructors say? Thek's breathing apparatus wheezed nervously. That is where it gets really interesting. Professor Halix called it an innovative application of unconventional warfare principles. Commander Draxus used words like tactically sound and psychologically sophisticated. But Lieutenant, Corvex. What did Corvex say? He asked Maya Torres to stay after class for a private consultation. Apparently, he wants to discuss incorporating human tactical doctrines into the advanced curriculum. I felt my skin shift to a particularly unhealthy shade of green. Lieutenant Corvex was the Academy's specialist in what they euphemistically called asymmetric warfare, the kind of military operations that most civilized species preferred not to think about too closely. There is more, Vex said quietly. After the simulation ended, Vex 12 confronted Maya Torres in the debriefing room. Oh, wonderful! Because clearly, what this situation needed was more stupidity from our least diplomatically gifted classmate. He accused her of cheating. That continued. Said that using maintenance shafts was not real military tactics and that she had won through trickery rather than skill. I waited for the other shoe to drop, because with humans, there was always another shoe, and it was usually a combat boot. Maya Torres listened to his entire complaint without saying a word, Thex said. Then she asked him one question. Would you prefer that I demonstrate real military tactics? The way Thex said it made my primary nervous system start sending alarm signals to organs I did not even know I had. Please tell me Vex was smart enough to say no? Vex said yes. Of course he did, because Vex 12 had apparently decided that his goal in life was to serve as a cautionary example for future generations of Academy cadets. What happened then? Thex's display shifted to show security footage from the debriefing room. I watched Maya Torres nod calmly at Vex 12's challenge, then walk over to the room's equipment locker. She removed what looked like a standard Academy practice blade, N-Mine, the kind we used for basic combat training, designed to deliver non-lethal shock instead of actual injury. She asked Vex to arm himself with whatever weapons he felt comfortable using. Vex explained. Standard Academy rules, non-lethal engagement, first contact, ends the match. Vex 12, who stood nearly twice Maya Torres's height and had 4 arms to her too, selected what looked like the entire contents of the weapons locker. Practice sword, shield, secondary blade, and some kind of ranged weapon that I did not recognize but looked impressively lethal even in training mode. Maya Torres stood in the center of the room, holding her single practice blade in a relaxed, almost casual grip. The match lasted exactly 4 seconds. I watched the security footage 3 times before I believed what I was seeing. Maya Torres moved with fluid, economical precision that made every motion seem effortless. She closed the distance to Vex before he could bring his ranged weapon to bear, deflected his sword strike with a movement so subtle it looked accidental, and somehow ended up behind him with her practice blade pressed against his throat. 4 seconds. Against an opponent who outweighed her by at least 50 kilograms and had twice as many limbs. How? I asked weakly. Speed, Thex said simply. Humans are apparently much faster than their species profile indicates, but more than that, she knew exactly where Vex was going to move before he moved. It was like she was reading his mind. I thought about that for a moment, remembering my research into human military history. Or, like she was, reading his body language. Humans are persistence hunters, right? They track prey over long distances by reading behavioral patterns and predicting movement. Exactly. Thex's breathing apparatus wheezed with what I was beginning to recognize as impressed fear. She was not just faster than Vex. She was operating on a completely different level of tactical awareness. The implications were starting to sink in, and they were not pleasant. If humans could routinely outmaneuver larger, stronger opponents through superior pattern recognition and tactical analysis. There is one more thing, Thex said quietly. After the match ended, Maya Torres helped Vex to his feet and made sure he was not injured. Then she said something that I think you need to hear. He activated an audio recording. Maya Torres's voice, calm and controlled as always. Vex, you are a good soldier. You follow doctrine, you train hard, and you are loyal to your teammates. Those are admirable qualities. But you made the mistake of thinking that tactics and violence are the same thing. They are not. Tactics are about achieving objectives with minimum resource expenditure. Violence is just one tool in the tactical toolbox, and usually not the most efficient one. There was a pause in the recording. Then Maya Torres continued. Today's simulation was not about violence. It was about information control, resource allocation, and psychological manipulation. The combat training just now was not about violence either. It was about movement, timing, and spatial awareness. If you want to understand human military doctrine, you need to stop thinking about fighting and start thinking about winning. The recording ended, leaving Thek and me sitting in uncomfortable silence. Finally, I found my voice. What happened to the other cadets who were mocking humans? Chick 17 requested a transfer to a different combat track, Thek said quietly. The others have been very, very polite to Maya Torres, ever since. I nodded slowly, processing everything I had learned. The picture that was emerging of human military capability was both fascinating and deeply disturbing. They were not just another species with different strengths and weaknesses. They were something entirely outside the normal parameters of galactic civilization. Thek, I said carefully, I think we need to reconsider our assumptions about humans. What do you mean? I mean that Maya Torres is not unusual for her species. She is typical. I activated my own study terminal and pulled up the research I had been conducting. Look at this. Human military history is full of examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through superior tactics, unconventional warfare, and psychological manipulation. What we saw today was not some kind of special human talent. It was standard human military doctrine. Thek studied the data I was showing him, his breathing apparatus cycling faster as he absorbed the implications. You are saying that every human has this kind of tactical capability? I am saying that every human military officer does. And Maya Torres is training to be a military officer. I highlighted several sections of my research. Humans do not just study warfare, Thek. They innovate it. They adapt it. They turn it into an art form. But they are so small, Thek protested weakly. So fragile. So are parasites, I pointed out. That does not make them less dangerous to larger organisms. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us contemplating what we had learned. Finally, Thek spoke up again. Corex, there is something else you should know. About Maya Torres. What now? She is not just any human. I did some research after today's events. Thek pulled up what looked like an Academy personnel file. Maya Torres graduated top of her class from something called the United Earth Special Operations Academy before coming here. Her specialization is listed as asymmetric warfare and psychological operations. I stared at the file in growing horror. She is not just a human. She is a human specialist in the kind of warfare that most species do not even acknowledge exists. Gets better, Thek said grimly. According to her records, she volunteered for the Galactic Academy exchange program specifically to study non-human military doctrine and psychology. The implications hit me like a plasma torpedo to the cognitive centers. She is not here to learn how to fight aliens. She is here to learn how to fight us. And we have been providing her with detailed information about our weaknesses, tactical doctrines, and psychological profiles for 3 entire rotations. I felt my skin cycle through several shades of panic-induced purple before settling on a sickly green that probably matched my emotional state perfectly. Thek, I said slowly, I think the Galactic Council made a serious miscalculation when they invited humans to join the Academy. What kind of miscalculation? They assumed humans wanted to learn from us, I said, staring at Maya Torres's personnel file with growing unease. But what if they already know everything they need to know about warfare? What if they are here to learn about us? Thek's breathing apparatus wheezed nervously. You think this is some kind of intelligence-gathering operation? I think, I said carefully, that humans are exactly what they appear to be. Small, fragile, unremarkable creatures who have somehow managed to survive and thrive in a hostile galaxy through superior tactical intelligence and adaptive capability. And I think that makes them the most dangerous species any of us has ever encountered. The next morning, I made a decision that would probably affect the rest of my military career. I requested a meeting with Maya Torres. We met in one of the Academy's small conference rooms, just the two of us. Maya Torres looked as calm and unremarkable as always, but now I could see what I had been missing before. The way she positioned herself to have clear sight lines to both entrances. The way her hands remained relaxed but ready. The way her eyes constantly tracked movement and assessed potential threats. You wanted to speak with me, Corex? She asked politely. I wanted to apologize, I said, for laughing along with the others when they were mocking your species. It was ignorant and disrespectful. Maya Torres nodded slightly. Apology accepted, though I should point out that your behavior was entirely predictable, given your species' psychological profile and cultural background. The casual way she said it sent chills through my secondary nervous system. She had been analyzing us all along, just as thoroughly as we thought we were analyzing her. Maya, I said carefully, can I ask you something? Of course. Are humans planning to conquer the galaxy? She looked genuinely surprised by the question, which was somehow more disturbing than if she had confirmed my suspicions. Conquer? No, that would be terribly inefficient. Why would we want to control territory when we can simply ensure that galactic civilization develops in ways that are compatible with human interests? The matter-of-fact way she said it made my skin crawl. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Maya Torres smiled, not the predatory smile from her demonstration, but something warmer and more genuine. Correct. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. We call it diplomacy. We find ways to make cooperation more profitable than conflict. We build relationships based on mutual benefit. We share knowledge and technology in ways that create interdependence rather than competition. She paused, studying my expression with those calm, intelligent eyes. The fact that we are also extremely good at violence is just insurance, to make sure that diplomacy remains the preferred option for everyone involved. I sat there for a long moment, processing what she had just told me. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and completely terrifying in its implications. Maya, I said finally, I think you and your species are going to fit into galactic civilization just fine. She nodded thoughtfully. That is the plan, yes. As I left that conference room, I realized that everything had changed. Not just my understanding of humans, but my understanding of the galaxy itself. We were not dealing with just another species seeking to find their place among the stars. We were dealing with apex predators who had already decided what that place was going to be. And the most terrifying part? I was starting to think they might be right.